Now, why is the U.S. irrelevant to these wars? Well, there are no U.S. troops in the Deep South, or none to speak of. There are special ops forces go down there and so forth. And so whatever's happening in Basra, the United States is just not very involved in it. And then, you know, the U.S. is always bad-mouthing the Mahdi army of the Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr, but the Mahdi army basically controls Maysan province, which is nearby to Basra, and they won it in the elections. And then no U.S. troops, to my knowledge, in Kurdistan. I mean, again, there may be a sprinkling here and there. There's a U.S. base out at the airport in Kirkuk. But there are seats down here, by the way. Come on down. I'm not playing Bob Barker when I say there's a U.S. base at Kirkuk. But the U.S. forces are very thin on the ground up north. And the reason for that is partially that in 2003, when the invasion occurred, the 4th Infantry Division was supposed to come through Turkey into northern Iraq, and the Turkish parliament declined to allow that to happen. So the U.S. never really did conquer northern Iraq. And it has a base around Mosul and so forth. But it's thinly populated up there. I don't think there are more than a couple thousand U.S. troops in Mosul, for instance. It's a major city. It's 1.5 million. It's a very important area. So 2 of these struggles are going on virtually without reference to U.S. troops, just because there aren't very many around in those regions. And then one of the struggles is going on with 160,000 U.S. troops present, but apparently unable to do anything about it, because the struggle is going on. So with regard to Basra in the south, this is 90% of the Iraqi government budget is coming from petroleum exports, and most of the exports are going through this city. You can see this is the Persian Gulf. That's Qasr, and that's Basra up there. You have to go up the Shuttle Arab to get to it. Now, what's going on in Basra, and who's fighting over what there? This is, again, a city of about 1.5 million. The province itself is larger. And there were elections provincial elections in Iraq. Remember the purple thumbs and all of the excitement about those elections in January 2005? Well, a lot of attention was focused on the federal parliamentary elections. But there were also provincial elections, and provincial councils came to power, and these were party lists. So what happened in Basra was that the Basra Provincial Council has 41 members, and 21 of the members of the council supported, in the aftermath of the election, the Islamic Virtue Party. The Islamic Virtue Party follows Ayatollah Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr, who was killed by Saddam in 1999. And it is one of a number of offshoots of his movement. The one that's most famous is led by Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr's son, Muqtada Sadr, who formed the Mahdi army and so forth. The Islamic Virtue Party does not follow the son. They follow the father, but they have their own leadership. It's led by a man named Ayatollah Muhammad Yaqubi. And there's a whole party apparatus in Basra, and this Islamic Virtue Party is extremely popular among the Shiites of Basra. So it's considered more moderate than Muqtada Sadr's branch of the movement, but these things are relative, and I don't see them always acting in a very moderate way. So they won. They control Basra, the Islamic Virtue Party. And they elected as their governor a man named Muhammad Misbah al-Wa'ili. And they have, all the parties in Iraq have paramilitaries, so they have a paramilitary, but they also control the government so that they can induct members of their paramilitary into the police and the local security forces. They control the guards who guard the refineries. This is very good. This is nice work if you can get it. Then the other 20 members of this council support the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq. That's led by Abdulaziz al-Hakim, a cleric who was in exile in Iran for 20 years, and the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq is an organization, it's an umbrella organization of Shiite parties, which was founded at the suggestion of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1982 in Tehran among Iraqi expatriate Shiites who had fled to Iran from Iraq to escape Saddam's persecution. So ultimately there were some 400,000 Iraqi Shiites in Iran. They have all come back now, but many of them were organized by the Supreme Council. So in Iraq, the Supreme Council is viewed by a lot of people as a kind of proxy for the Iranian government. It is also closely allied with the Bush administration, and for that reason, the Bush administration doesn't talk about it as a proxy of the Iranian government, and it blames all the other Shiites for being pro-Iranian. So there's violence in Basra. And a recent British parliamentary report, because the British were in charge of the 4 provinces of the south, a recent British parliamentary report concluded that there's continuing violence against civilians in Basra. There are reprisals against former members of the Ba'ath Party, and there is a significant, several tens of thousands, a Sunni community in Basra, which has sometimes been targeted by Shiites, who were viewed as having supported Saddam. In some cases, this is correct. Then there was local resistance to the British military presence, and so British jeeps on patrol would get blown up by roadside bombs. There would be sniping at them and so forth. Then there's Marsh Arab tribal mafias. The Marsh Arabs, a population of some 500,000 Iraqis in the south, dwelled in the marshes. When the Tigris and Euphrates came south, the water was diverted into lowlands and it made marshes. So these are kind of the bayou Arabs. They made their living from farming and fishing in the marshes, and the marshes are also great for hiding out if you're a criminal. So there's lots of smuggling and illicit things going on down there, and then also guerrillas can hide out there. So when the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq was a guerrilla group, and it was based in Iran, it would come across into Iraq through the marshes. It would hit Saddam's guys, and then it would go back into the marshes and hide. So Saddam fixed their wagon and drained the marshes. And he just displaced thousands and thousands and thousands of people from their livelihood and made them, they basically ended up living in shanty towns around southern Shiite cities as slum dwellers, day laborers and peddlers and so forth. Desperately poor, but still organized by tribe. You know, tribe is a kinship system, and it can have political implications. So the Marsh Arabs are strongly tribal, and some of them, having lost their livelihood, and anyway already being somewhat involved in things like smuggling, turned to crime. And so South Iraq is riddled with Marsh Arab mafia families. And they weren't allowed by Saddam into Basra in the old days, but the British let them in. And so they fight turf wars with each other and with Shiite militias for control of parts of Basra. And I've interviewed refugees from Basra who've told me horrific stories about Marsh Arab activities that, you know, Don Corleone has nothing on them. And then finally, there's party and militia competition in Basra. There's the Islamic Virtue Party, the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, and the Sadr movement all have paramilitaries. They're all engaged in political competition with one another, but they also do fight turf wars with one another with their militias. So all of that is going on. And over time, Basra's security has gotten worse and worse. So, and it's not just Basra. There has been fighting between these Shiite factions in a number of southern cities, Diwania and Amara, there's Butter Corps elements and Mahdi Army elements fight each other. Now, The Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, the party that had been based in Iran, had a paramilitary, they called it the Badr Corps, which was trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And what you have to remember is, from the Bush administration point of view, Iranian Revolutionary Guards bad, Badr Corps good. I can't entirely understand how they're different from one another, but anyway, that's the way it works. So the Badr Corps has been fairly disciplined, has been a de facto ally of the United States in Iraq, and the Supreme Council won many of the provincial elections in the South, and the U.S. military views the elected authorities as the ones it has to support. So basically, the Badr Corps was inducted into the police of most of the southern provinces, and they're fighting the Mahdi army militia. When you see, Iraqi police engage in gun battle with Mahdi army elements in Diwaniyah, actually you can think that's the Badr Corps fighting the Mahdi army. These are two Shiite paramilitaries. And both the Badr Corps and the Mahdi army have kidnapped people. They run secret courts and prisons in basements. They tie people up. They beat them. They torture them. They extract ransom from them. And the Iraqi government has occasionally fired large numbers of people for being dirty with such activities. But you wonder where they're getting the replacements. By May of 2006, a year and a half ago, Basra was being reported in the Arabic press as being in chaos, dominated by militias and lawless gangs. Automobiles with darkened windows cruise the streets, armed militiamen within, imposing their law on the city. There are tribal fights between Marsh Arab tribes like Al-Bayt Sa'ida and the Banu Mansur. Then there's also fighting between them and the militias. It was announced in May of 2006 by the Basra police that in the previous month there had been 800 assassinations. So, I mean, these guys are whacking each other. And so what are they fighting over? Well, partly it's territory, but why? They're fighting over rights to petroleum smuggling. Once you refine petroleum into gasoline or kerosene, it's a very fungible commodity. And whose truck it arrives in Iran is really not of anybody's interest, or what skiff it goes out into the Persian Gulf on is not of anybody's interest. So it's smuggled. And these guys are all basically on the lookout for one of those, trucks like you see on the road that has the petroleum in them. It's written ExxonMobil on them or something. If that's in Iraq, somebody else will be driving it not too long from now. They grab up this stuff on the streets, or they siphon it off from the refineries, and they sell it. It has been estimated in one report that refined petroleum product smuggling accounts for a loss to the Iraqi government of $2 billion a year in revenues, which is a different way of putting that is that these militias are getting $2 billion a year. That's an income for a militia. You could do something with that if you were ambitious.